Attention on JustProfessor here. Your brain thinks two things happening together is more likely than one thing happening alone, which is mathematically impossible. But your brain does it anyway, and this basic math error is making you believe completely wrong things about probability, risk, and what's actually going to happen in your life. Here's a simple question. Linda is 31 years old, single, outspoken, and very bright. She studied philosophy and was deeply concerned with social justice issues as a student, which is more likely that Linda is a bank teller, or that Linda is a bank teller who's active in the feminist movement. Most people pick the second option, but that's impossible. A bank teller who's also a feminist is a subset of all bank tellers. The first option has to be more likely because it includes the second option plus all the bank tellers who are feminists. This is the conjunction fallacy, and your brain falls for it constantly. The conjunction fallacy is when you judge a specific combination of events as more probable than a single general event, even though that's logically impossible. Two things happening together can never be more likely than one of those things happening alone. But your brain doesn't care about this mathematical truth. It sees a compelling story where details fit together, and it decides that detailed story must be more likely than a simpler version. This happens because your brain judges probability based on how well things fit together rather than on actual math. A detailed scenario that makes sense feels more likely than a vague general statement. The specific feels more real and believable than the abstract. So your brain assigns higher probability to the conjunction of events than to a single event, which is backwards. The problem is this affects how you assess risks, make predictions, and understand what's likely to happen. You overestimate the probability of specific scenarios because they have compelling details. You underestimate the probability of general outcomes because they feel vague. And you end up with a completely distorted sense of what's actually likely versus unlikely. Let me show you where this affects real thinking. Political predictions fall into this constantly. Someone might say, there's going to be a recession next year. That's a general prediction. But if someone says, there's going to be a recession next year caused by inflation getting out of control, leading to the Federal Reserve raising interest rates too aggressively, which will slow down consumer spending. That detailed story feels more convincing, even though it's mathematically less likely. The specific chain of events can't be more probable than just recession happens, because the detailed scenario is one specific way a recession could happen out of many possible ways. But the detailed version feels more likely because it tells a story. Your brain can picture it happening. It seems plausible and well-reasoned. So people give higher probability estimates to the detailed scenario than to the simple prediction, which is the conjunction fallacy in action. Medical diagnosis suffers from this. A patient has symptoms. A doctor might think this patient has disease X, or they might think this patient has disease X, which was triggered by factor Y and is complicated by condition Z. The specific detailed diagnosis feels more compelling and can seem more likely, even though any specific detailed scenario has to be less likely than the simpler diagnosis. Adding conditions and causes makes the diagnosis less probable mathematically, but it can make it feel more probable psychologically. Business planning shows this bias clearly. Someone presents a business plan. The simple version is, this business will succeed. The detailed version is, this business will succeed because we'll capture the millennial market with our innovative approach, which will give us first-mover advantage, leading to rapid growth and market dominance. The detailed story feels way more convincing. Investors are more likely to believe the specific scenario, even though every additional detail you add makes the exact scenario less likely to play out that way. Risk assessment gets completely distorted by this. Think about terrorism versus car accidents. People are more afraid of specific terrorism scenarios, a bomb on a plane, an attack at a crowded event, than they are of dying in an accident. But dying in a car accident is far more likely than dying in any specific type of terrorist attack. The specific terrorism scenarios feel more real and probable because they're detailed and vivid. The general category of accidents feels less likely, even though it includes many more ways to die. Weather predictions show this in an interesting way. People are more likely to believe it will rain tomorrow because a cold front is moving in from the north, meeting warm, moist air from the south, than just it will rain tomorrow. The detailed meteorological story feels more credible. But the detailed scenario is necessarily less likely than simply rain happens, because it specifies one particular way it could rain out of many possible meteorological patterns. Conspiracy theories thrive on the conjunction fallacy. A conspiracy theory is always a detailed story with multiple connected events. The government is hiding something becomes the government is hiding something because agencies X, Y, and Z are coordinating to suppress evidence, which was collected by person A and hidden by person B for reason C. The detailed version feels more compelling and believable, even though every additional detail makes the exact scenario exponentially less probable. Sports predictions do this. Team A will win is less psychologically compelling than Team A will win because their star player will have a breakout game. Their defense will shut down Team B's offense and they'll take an early lead that they'll hold throughout. The detailed prediction feels more informed and more likely, but it's mathematically less likely because it specifies a particular way the win could happen rather than just predicting the win generally. Investment analysis falls into this trap. An analyst might predict a stock will go up, but a more detailed prediction. This stock will go up because they'll release a successful product in Q3, which will beat earnings expectations, leading to positive analyst coverage and increased institutional buying. Feels more credible, even though it's less likely. The specific chain of events is one possible path out of many ways the stock could increase. So, how do you avoid the conjunction fallacy? How do you think about probability more accurately? First, remember the basic math rule. Two things happening together is always less likely than one thing happening. Every time you add a detail or condition, you're narrowing the possibilities and reducing the probability. Detailed scenarios can never be more likely than general outcomes, no matter how compelling the story is. Second, strip away the narrative. When someone presents a detailed scenario, reduce it to its core claim. What's the basic prediction without all the specifics about how it will happen? Judge the probability of that core claim rather than getting seduced by the detailed story around it. Third, ask about alternatives. If someone predicts a specific sequence of events, ask what other ways the outcome could occur. This helps you see that the specific scenario is just one path out of many, which makes you realize it can't be more likely than the general outcome. Fourth, be suspicious of compelling stories. The conjunction fallacy works because detailed scenarios tell good stories that your brain finds believable. When a prediction or explanation seems particularly compelling because of its details, that's exactly when you should be skeptical. The story might be making it seem more likely than it actually is. Fifth, think in terms of sets and subsets. A feminist bank teller is a subset of bank tellers. A specific type of recession is a subset of all recessions. A particular sequence of events is a subset of all ways an outcome could occur. Subsets are always smaller than the full set, which means they're always less likely. Sixth, focus on base rates rather than specific scenarios. What's the general probability of the outcome happening regardless of the specific path? That's what you should estimate. The detailed scenarios are just possible ways it could happen, not independent probabilities. The conjunction fallacy is a fundamental error in how your brain judges probability. You make detailed, specific scenarios seem more likely than simple general outcomes when the math says the exact opposite has to be true. This isn't about being bad at math. It's about your brain preferring stories to statistics. Stories are powerful. When someone tells you a detailed narrative about how something will happen, your brain engages with that story. You can picture it. It makes sense. It feels real, so you judge it as more likely, but every detail they add is actually making the scenario less probable, not more. They're specifying one particular path when many different paths could lead to the same outcome. This affects everything from how you assess risks to how you make predictions to what conspiracy theories you might believe. Detailed, compelling scenarios feel more true than vague, general statements. But feeling true and being likely are completely different things. Understanding the conjunction fallacy helps you see through this illusion. When someone presents a detailed prediction or explanation, you can recognize that the details are making it less likely, not more likely, regardless of how compelling the story is. You can separate the probability of the outcome from the probability of one specific path to that outcome. The next time someone tells you a detailed story about what's going to happen or why something happened, don't just accept it because it sounds good. Strip away the details and ask about the core claim. Is the basic outcome likely? The specific scenario has to be less likely than the general outcome no matter how well the story fits together. Your brain will keep falling for the conjunction fallacy because stories will always feel more compelling than statistics. But you can catch yourself doing it. You can remember that more detail equals less probability. You can fight against the intuition that says compelling, detailed scenarios are more likely when math says they can't be. Watch the next video to discover another probability bias making you wrong about odds.